places, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Unsung. I sincerely thank you all for being here. I really do. I'm sitting here in the studio right now with a guy that I don't know that much about. Y'all may not know that much about him, but I think by the end of this podcast, you're going to know a whole lot more, as am I. Without further ado, Frederick Tamagi. Fred, how you doing?
I'm well, Gavin. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure. You know, you and I don't know that much about each other. However, we have been around in the periphery of this scene of art and music and all these things. Are you born in Calgary?
I was born in Calgary, and my family's from Calgary. I think I mentioned earlier before we started taping that I'm second generation Japanese Canadian. My parents were born in Canada as well. My mother in Vancouver, my father in southern Alberta, and we moved to Calgary in about 1958. And we've been here ever since. So I'm absolutely a Canadian with Japanese roots.
1958, and that does not give away your age, does it?
No.
Good. Don't anybody out there do the math, all right? We're musicians. I mean, we can count up to 4.
We don't talk about our age. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm curious, what made you interested in music? I mean, I don't know if there's a making an individual interested or a person is interested. What was it for you?
You know, that's a really good question. We weren't really a musical family, although my father had a wonderful singing voice, and loved Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, and you know, at family gatherings and company gatherings in his business, he would often get up and be asked to sing, and had a wonderful baritone voice. And I don't know if he influenced me so much as it just made me aware that that singing was a thing. And then I can remember just as a little boy, I just loved listening to music. And as I sort of grew up, you and I are kind of from the same era. So, you know, as a young person, as a young boy, the Beatles came on the scene, and you know, we bought those records, or we had them bought for us by our parents. We listened to them over and over again. I learned the songs. Some of them were in my key. That was before my voice had broken, so I could get up there in Paul McCartney range as he could sing, and so on. And so I enjoyed just singing those songs. And
well, you were very steeped in the songwriters, obviously, even though maybe you hadn't realized that part of yourself yet. Obviously, you were gravitating there, right?
Yeah, I didn't. You know, it's interesting because I didn't know where the songs came from. I knew that they wrote them, but I was transfixed from the very first Beatles record that I heard. That learning later on that they wrote their own songs, they wrote their own music, wondering where the poetry came from, wondering where the riffs came from, all of those things that you know, make these artists who they are and how great they are and how transcendent they are. You may have had the same experience with drumming, that being influenced by that.
It's what art does, you know. I mean, we were talking before, you know, we came on today, you know, just like I'm going through all of the great philosophers right now, and Nietzsche being the one that I'm listening to at the moment. And it's the journey, the hero's journey that we go on, whether we decide to undertake that or not. To eat craft dinner for, like I said, 20 years, you know, and to do these things, to pain ourselves, you know, for the betterment of ourselves. There is this undeniable part of ourselves that is being not preached to, but spoken to. And
I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. In fact, I think that, you know, what you just said in quoting Nietzsche about this idea that we create, that this is a pursuit that just spontaneously happens, and that we are created by nature. I think that's sort of a paraphrase, but I completely agree with that, because I think it has everything to do with this identity that we are born with. you know, like whatever your spiritual persuasion is, you know, there's this this sense that before we learn anything, before we're influenced, before we're spoiled by the world, we kind of are who we are. And I think part of that has to do with, as you said, like an inherent sense, an inherent desire, inherent drive to create. And that's actually become a huge part of not only my my creative or artistic life, but it's also become a huge part of was always a huge part of my business life, and actually became a huge part of my life in the creative community. Just my own experience with understanding identity and my own identity, that introspection you talked about before we came on air. I think that creativity is inherent. And then the part that you said, which is so valid, is you have to decide. There's a point in time in your life where you have to decide whether the drive is strong enough or the vision that you get from it is strong enough that you need to pursue it, that you can't help yourself. And most artists that I've talked to, and I've talked with lots of artists, particularly over the last 10 or 15 years, pretty much every one of them have said that, you know, it ends up being something they can't help doing. Yeah.
For me, it's a way to give my life meaning. Well, and it doesn't give my life meaning, it just is meaning.
Yeah.
Just by its very nature.
It is the meaning of your life. And at least that part that you can actually sort of control and you can decide to do. I mean, there's all kinds of crap that happens all around us, and circumstances and people and relationships. But this is the part about identity that's so important and compelling to me, is it's the one thing, your identity is the one thing that is your own completely, right? Mm-hmm. That you can hang on to, that you can anchor in on, that you can look to, that is yours 100%, and it isn't owned by anyone else.
Once again, I think there's a duality there, in the fact that to have our identity is closely tied to the community, in the sense of, you know, like our parents, mm-hmm. and how we are raised and how we're treated, and, you know, how we're going to grow up that way. But then our expression, and here's where, you know, I think we're at these days, and that is, you know, that our expressions don't necessarily seem to be as, I don't want to say valued, but, and I hate to use the word censored, mm-hmm. but in a way, there is some censorship around us expressing our identity, where everyone wants to express themselves plainly and truly and openly. And yet there is at the same time some sense of judgment in our society that I never felt growing up, I can tell you that. I never felt it maybe 6 years ago. And I don't know, what do you think about that? And what do you think, let me ask you this, what do you think about artistic disciplines speaking to those issues?
Well, you know, actually, I wasn't sure you were going to go there, but I'm glad you did, because when you talked about the last couple of years, which coincidentally has a lot to do with the COVID pandemic and lockdown and isolation, and the way that generated or provoked introspection, right? Like a self-examination of who we are, what we're doing, who people are. You can call it coincidence, or you can call it not a coincidence, but I think in some ways it was long overdue for us to start to examine that, right? Because it speaks to this idea of identity, like who we are, what we must do, right? As opposed to what we have to do, or what we're being forced to do or influenced to do by the outside world. So when it comes to the subject of creativity, which you just touched on, I don't think it's any more important or any more prevalent than it is in the creative community, because this idea of self-expression is supposed to be the cornerstone of being creative or being an artist, right? At the same time, when you look at two things, the influence of your peers and the people around you, and the need for approval, the need for acceptance, that ends up putting your self-expression through another kind of filter, right? I'm going to express this, but is it okay with you? Or do you think it's good, right? Do you think it's acceptable? Mm. The other thing is, you made a reference earlier about eating craft dinner every night, and it sounds to me like, you know, you've been a professional musician, a professional road musician, where sometimes the gigs are great, sometimes they're not, sometimes they pay, sometimes they don't. And sometimes you find yourself in a situation where for your life of art, your pursuit of art, you are eating craft dinner, right? And you make that choice.
Absolutely.
But the second point that I wanted to make is the other influence is this idea of the commerciality, if you will. I don't even know if that's a word. My experience with all the artists I've been involved in over the years has been there's a drive for commercial success, a drive for fame, a drive for some of those benchmarks that give you the validation as an artist, right? Oh, how many people came to see me? How many people bought my records? How much money can I make just playing music all the time? And I think what that ends up doing again is it ends up being another filter through which you've got to project your self-expression, right? Is this something that people can listen to? Is the song that I wrote, is it a nice 3.5 minutes so that it's radio friendly? And if I have to write it that way, does it contain everything that I wanted it to contain? Does it express what I wanted it to express because of those parameters? And if I don't make it in the outside commercial world, if I don't make it as a touring artist or a best-selling artist, does that place a value on me as an artist? And I think I felt empathy and I felt, in some cases, felt sympathy for a lot of artists that have worked really hard for that, have failed in the commercial world, and therefore, because of those judgments, have begun to think of themselves as a failure creatively, when they're clearly not. So this is part of, I think, what you're trying to do with your podcast, is you're trying to say, look, this has everything to do with inner truth. This has everything to do with your identity as an artist or creative. That in and itself has value. And unless you can hold on to that and grasp onto that and anchor into that value, these other filters that we talked about, outside acceptance, commercial acceptance, those become filters that blur your vision of yourself.
It starts at the bottom, it doesn't start at the top.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I'd call it bottom. It is the community that is the cradle, the incubator, that needs to be nurtured, that needs to be recognized as valuable, which unfortunately, what you call the industry and what I'm going to call like the commercialization of it, doesn't necessarily recognize as being valuable. Maybe the majority of the population of artists in the world are community artists, right? Some all gifted, all with a creative drive, some amazing and outstanding and transcendent, others average in respect to, I guess, ability or whatever. But the point is that in that community are, the future Elton Johns, right? The future Bob Dylans, the
Absolutely.
future Taylor Swifts, whoever they are. But unless they are encouraged, unless they're recognized and given the sense of themselves that they are creatives, that they are artists, we may never ever hear of them, ever.
Absolutely.
So I completely agree with you.
Well, and let me qualify, my statement at bottom, because I totally agree with you that in a sense that has a negative
way.
Yeah, no, but it does have a negative connotation. Yeah. There is this thing that I've been thinking about the construction of civic music, music in a certain geographical location that is not national or international, let's say. Yeah. So if I take this bottom, not in a negative sense approach, I sort of fashion it on education. So the creation of the young, the teaching of the young and the beginning of mastery for the young, up to a certain point where maybe they can proliferate their art on a civic level or on a geographical level, let's say within the city of Calgary. Yeah. But and so as you grow in these sorts of tiers, I suppose, you get to a proliferation of mastery and of national and international art. Okay. All the while, and this is, I think, what probably scares some people, is that all the while, no one gets necessarily rapaciously rich off of these endeavors, but that ultimately that money is funneled down to support a foundation of education rising up through that rank to national or international proliferation and back down to the bottom. And you have this cyclical sort of construct that keeps everything vital, everything working. That's why I think it's so important for brothers and sisters. You know, that's one of the reasons I have you here today, and to talk about the thing that I think I'll segue to, which is this 3 project. Right. This intrigued me so much when I saw Steph, and he's pushing pretty hard. He's been a heavy advocate for this, and I'm glad that he is. But what I would like to know is, what is it? What is the ideology behind it? What are your thoughts? Because you are the creator of the project.
Well, okay, just to maybe start out, I'm really glad you're bringing it up. Is this idea that you've had about civic music, or that this paradigm that you have of it's not commercial music, it's not clubs, it's not records, it's not concerts and arenas and commercial music as such. It has something to do with the community and what we've said, this sort of incubator, or this harvested field of creatives and artists that are from their lives growing up and want to know if they can actually share their art that they're born with. I agree with the idea. The problem is when you use the word civic, and I know I've watched a couple of your other podcasts. I know you asked this question of a couple of other people, like Cindy as an example, who had this sort of great take on the idea of, why doesn't the government get involved? Why isn't public funding somehow involved behind this? I watched another podcast you did with Mike Clark. He said the same thing, that they're starting to have dialogue with the government about funding and creating grants and so on, because they're out there. But as a percentage of money being spent by the government, what's being spent on the arts isn't enough to create this vision, if you will, of this large civic community of artists and creativity that you're talking about. So the government was helpful to us in a lot of ways, right? Gave us an environment, particularly as an immigrant family, right, to get involved in business. But by and large, whatever you wanted to do, you had to take a risk. You had to invest your own money. You had to make a decision for yourself that this is what you're going to do. And I think that pretty much everybody that's involved in the creative community that has a similar vision to you knows that what it takes is it takes people with both, I guess, the vision, the energy, and the wherewithal, even the financial wherewithal, to actually try something and make something happen. Okay, so that's sort of, I guess, the beginning seeds, if you will, about the discussion about the 3 project. So if you don't mind, I'll just start with a little bit of a story regarding how I started to think about the community and the creative community.
Sure, yeah.
About 12, 13 years ago, we had sold our business, and I had decided to pursue some of the creative things that I wanted to, part of which was being like a part-time singer-songwriter. I was a part-time singer-songwriter. I had a few songs in my book, and I wanted to start kind of sharing them. But pretty much everybody, every club owner, every cafe owner, every pub owner looked at me and said, well, I don't really know you. How many people can you bring in? We have, some regular artists that play here all the time. You're probably familiar with this because I think you were probably one of them. We have like a rotation. So thanks for your interest, but no thanks. I also noticed that they had sort of an established list, if you will, of artists that pretty much rotated through these 4 or 5 or 6 places. When I finished making the rounds of these places, I realized that there was no place for community artists. There was no place for people like us.
Right, or new blood,
to play.
Yeah, like new artists, yeah.
Thankfully, because we had just sold our business and I was, financially independent, I said, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open a place for people like me.
All right.
Part of my thought process was that if I owned a place, that the owner could hardly refuse me a gig if I owned my own place. So part of it was that.
Right.
But a very small part of it. Most of it was because I realized there was no place in town where, you know, an emerging community artist who was just kind of trying to get out there and share their art, and not just songs, but all kinds of art.
Unless it became, you know, Fred Tamagi's, and here Fred Tamagi, you know, and order the hamburger to Fred Tamagi.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't all about you, but nobody's going to hold you responsible for that. But there was this other side of it that you're saying.
That's right.
That was for the artists themselves.
I actually ended up buying a little place in downtown Calgary called Koi, and it was at that time like a kind of a hip, very small, like 50 seats, Asian fusion, sort of hipster kind of place. But the current owner at the time was looking for a partner. And the space was like a really raw space. He hadn't spent very much money on it, and it was like a concrete floors and very, very minimalist. And it was actually kind of cool looking.
Was this before the advent of music at Koi? Or were they having music at Koi?
They were having some music at Koi, but it was mostly DJ type music.
Okay, so not the way we know Koi today. Okay,
no, absolutely not.
Great.
So what I did was I went to this guy, and he was looking for a partner. And I said, well, look, I'm prepared to become a partner. I'm prepared to invest money, but this is my idea for this place. I want to make it into a music and arts cafe. I want to spend some money. I want to make the atmosphere a good atmosphere, not just for guests, but for artists. I want to build a nice small stage. I want to have decent lighting. I want to have good sound, and I want to have managed sound so that whoever plays here, whoever performs here, feels like they're valued. Okay, because you probably know this too. Early in your career as a musician, you probably played in some not so friendly places where you know, the atmosphere was not that good, the sound was shitty, and nobody looked after it, and you ended up sounding way worse than you could have. And so I was at that time, I just said that it's important to me that no matter who walks in as a performer, that they feel first and foremost that this is a place for artists and where artists are valued.
And welcomed.
And welcome, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
This is actually the second part of what I'll talk about. But made a deal to become the majority owner of Koi, and we closed down for about 4 months to renovate it. And so the Koi that you probably know now, which just closed in July after a fantastic 13-year run, basically was as a result of this investment, right? There needed to be a place not only for artists like myself to get an opportunity to play, but also there needed to be a place where artists just like me had an opportunity to belong. You know, it's sort of an old adage. It's a bit of a meme that artists are loners, right? You know, we dwell in our basements or our bedrooms or whatever, and we're creating and we're into ourselves or unto ourselves a lot. But you know what I found over the years, particularly when we started Koi and ever since, and everything else that we've done in the creative community, is that there's a part of an artist, there's a part of a creative person that actually longs to belong to a community, that longs to be around other like-minded artists that are struggling, that are having the same doubts, the same creative explosions, the same challenges.
I just want to interject here because
ahead.
I want to use the word collaboration. I think that as much as you're right, I mean, there are some things and there's some things that I'm creating right now that are sort of me singularly, you know, certainly an editing process is kind of a singular venture. Excuse me, things like this. But collaboration is the one thing that I think we miss a lot in this society. Depending, I mean, if you have the money to do it, you know, and the industry maybe support to do it, you've got it. Yeah. Once again, I go back to this civic level ideal or idea, because I don't think it's an ideal, I think it's a necessity, that we start to create from the bottom up. And I don't, once again, not the negative connotation of that.
The reference, yeah.
And so with that comes this ability for education first, right? So there's understanding or knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And I kind of take these three things as to be, the understanding is just the fact that something exists, right? Or the knowledge is just that something exists. The understanding is knowing how that thing works. Yeah. And the wisdom is the practical application of both of those things. So to me, that's kind of when I talk about the tiers of this, they're sort of built on that ideology of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So the knowledge is the fact that we educate. The understanding is that people get to use it in some form that is relevant, viable, feeds the society and the civic, the geography in which that person presides. And then there is the wisdom, I suppose, which is the mastery, which is the outside of ourselves and outside of our boundaries and outside of our local geography, nationally or internationally. And so when we talk about these things and we talk about COI, to me, COI was this educational, in a sense, mixed with the sort of understanding part of it, where people got to, create and got to feel a part of something, had the ability to fail. Yep. And feel bad enough, I guess, about failing, about their own failures, that they would come back the next time and do better. And then at some point, like in the case of Deanne Madley, in the case of other people that I know, grace the steps of COI, that they went on to that sort of national, proliferation sort of thing, not to the extent of an Elton John or anything like that, but viably and in some sense masterfully. I think that's what COI meant to me as an observer. It was a little small example of what I'm thinking in my head.
Wow, I appreciate you saying that. I think, and I think you're right. Now that I understand what you mean by sort of this civic model that you're talking about, I don't think I ever thought about it in quite so organized a fashion as you've just expressed it. But this idea of creating a place where first people felt like they could belong to something, that they could feel comfortable, to use your term, to fail, and not be judged by failing. In fact, I remember being criticized a little bit by more established artists that, as an example, at our open mics, because our open mics at COI became a little bit iconic. I want to make sure I'm not blowing, pumping my own tires here or anything or whatever, but have become quite iconic. And but I used to get criticism from some artists saying, well, how come everybody gets the same amount of applause? Whether they're absolutely outstanding or they're actually not so great. And so, well, one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure, to your point, that the people that are on the stage at the open mic feel like they're not only part of something, but they're supported and encouraged.
Absolutely. Can I just interject as well? And I'm sorry for interjecting, but
no, go ahead.
Because there is this intrinsic thing that people try. You may not get it right, but why does someone who's great or someone, let's say, who sucks get as much applause as someone who's great? Because in this environment, all are trying.
Yeah.
Now that is good. Now, when I talk about the wisdom part of this, the national, international proliferation of music, this is the way to grow into that. So, someone who does, let's just use the term suck, would not necessarily be on that proliferation on a grand scale, but they would be learning and they would be judging themselves, most importantly, although maybe, with a group of masterful individuals around them to tell them what they could do better, to tell them how to grow, to get them involved in courses and learning that brought them to that stage, if that's where they wanted to go.
I mean, this is actually, you've hit on something really important here. This is actually part of why we were intentionally trying to create a community like that, because it was populated from very early days. It was populated by some, very capable and talented artists, others that were just starting out, others that were not only just starting out, but were really not that great. And what ended up happening, and which we really tried to promote and tried to encourage people to do, is this sharing, right? This this exchange of information and this exchange of encouragement with each other. I had someone say to me on the same questioning, you know, why is it that this person got a lot of applause, who was great, and this person got almost as much applause, not so great? And I looked at that person that the person was asking, and I said, well, because we reward passion here.
There's a certain humility, I think, to the artist, and a certain understanding that we are not there, that we will never reach that place, but that there is a place for the people that you're talking about, that need that guidance and that direction, and that, you know what I mean? So that if they want to achieve their goals, their ultimate goals, there is a potential of that happening, not just for the few, but for the many. If I'm picking up on the things that you're saying, it seems to me, and you can answer this then, moving on to 3, that 3 was necessarily a necessary byproduct or a necessarily progression as to what Koi began.
It sort of stayed with me after I sold Koi, this idea of, is there another step? Is there another threshold from which these community artists can come from to another place where maybe they can not only share their art with a larger audience, right, a larger group of people who maybe didn't know them, even though these artists are growing in the garden of the community right around us all. At the same time, the philosophy of trying to provide these artists not only with an opportunity, but actually a quality opportunity, right? A place with like I said, great ambiance, good sound, good lights, to make them understand, to help them to understand that they're quality artists. That was part of my thought process around the 3 project. I didn't really know what it was going to look like until that, you know, the songwriter circle that I did with this artist. He had written some amazing original tunes that sounded to me in my ear just like great show tunes, but modern show tunes. And it stuck with me to the point where I realized that, you know, the best way, and maybe it's a risky way, but the best way to try something is to actually try something completely new. So that's why instead of just trying to organize another concert or another showcase, of which, you know, there are many, and obviously great quality, and there's clubs around town that are showcasing artists all the time, I thought maybe sort of the best way to try and disrupt a little bit and show community artists in a new light was to show them in a little bit of a musical theater package, something that would appeal to maybe a broader audience that are used to going to songwriter shows, or are used to going to poetry shows, or used to going to jazz shows at the clubs. The other thing that I realized is that the creative community is really diverse. Okay, songwriters tend to hang out with songwriters. Jazzers tend to hang with jazzers. Poetry, spoken word people, and literary people tend to hang out in their enclaves, in their camps. But what I thought was, is there a way to bring the diversity of the community to a greater audience? And that's one of the reasons why I started thinking about 3 artists, and the 3 project came from that. I was thinking about 3 completely different artists with completely different genres, completely different personalities, even completely different demographics. And so you can see in our feature artist lineup, Carla, you know, is a wonderful singer-songwriter who has, you know, like a great history of writing great songs. Wakefield Brewster has been a community poet and spoken word artist here since came to Calgary in 2006, and has been in the community sharing his art. But it's only just recently that it's been recognized. And last year he was appointed Calgary Poet Laureate.
Wow,
that's right. And Stefano Valdo, who of course you know really well, a friend of yours. Again, a completely different artist, wonderful bassist of all genres, but particularly a wonderful jazz bassist, embedded in the musical community as one of the ultimate side people. Plays in a lot of different ensembles and bands for everyone, but doesn't often get a chance to express himself as a feature artist.
Right.
So that was the sort of the second step in the way I was thinking about 3, is that it was a way to possibly bring together different communities in one show, and all they need is an opportunity, again, just like at Koi, to show themselves in a high quality environment. So
to me, it doesn't matter that creation take on different forms. It is all creation.
Yes.
And not only that, but I think that you can fuse all elements of creation together. That's why there's musical theater or music in theater. That's why there's theater in music.
Right.
I've never seen the distinction. Maybe because I come out of a bit of a theatrical background, although music far before that. I wanted to be, or at least attempt to go down the road of mastery with something, and you can't do that with everything.
Sounds like someone should be interviewing you.
No.
Which should happen.
Maybe at some point.
Yeah.
I am much more at home these days, looking at the great things that people are doing as part of the community, which is yourself. But that being said, once again, I don't think there's a distinction. A tree falls in the forest and it makes a sound. Yeah. So it's both theater and music, both at the same time. And so, in respect to that, I think it's such a great thing that you're producing, that you're bringing to the community.
We decided that it would be a really great experiment to see if these artists who have never done this before would be willing to share more about who they were when they wrote their original piece, what was happening to them, who they were as people, what they were struggling with at the time. And the reason that we thought that this might be a kind of a grand experiment was that I've always felt that community artists, because they seem so far away from celebrity, don't necessarily feel that they're artists because they don't live that storied life. That they don't have this sort of spectacular backstory of how did I become a platinum selling, artist, right? How did I become a best-selling author? And it struck me because if they had the courage and they could see that sharing their lives and who they were when they were creating art would be valuable to other artists in the community, so that anyone coming to the 3 Project who's an artist or even a non-artist who's just aspiring to be who they want to be will learn that these amazing artists that they're going to see on stage, as they share about their lives and who they are and who they were as they created their art, that they'll find out that, these are people just like me. Like, we are not different. Like, these people don't live storied lives. They live lives. They struggle with the same things that every human being does. But at the same time, they've recognized that the core of their identity is to be an artist.
I think one of the grandest tests of all this is not can an artist be honest, but does the community want to know? Or do they want to hide
point
behind the veil of celebrity? So we don't want to know. And I think that there is validation in both. I mean, I've always felt that the stage is holy ground, in a sense, that you don't get to take the stage unless you've proven your worth to be on that platform.
Okay.
And that, though, not from a celebritized point of view, because here's the duality of that, and that is that you're not celebrating the wonderment of a greater person like an Ubermensch. Mm-hmm. You're celebrating someone who is just like you, who took the journey. And that's the only celebrity that, or the only attachment to celebrity I think there need be. It's not I don't think it needs to be a monetized thing, although maybe slightly. Because I do believe that someone who proves greatness should benefit to some degree that does not hurt the community overall.
No disagreement there.
Right. I think that what we have, though, is we have, Paul McCartney worth $1 billion and your local civic artist worth nothing. That to me is a problem. But not that Paul McCartney not be either celebrated or at least recognized. Let's say recognized. Maybe that's what we're talking about, is recognition for being for taking the journey,
Right.
and that's fine. It's the whole culture of, the monetization element of it and the celebritized thing of it that says, well, you can't, I can, and that's why I'm worth more than you. No. I would never believe that. And I don't think that belief has ever stood the test of time.
Yeah.
So to me, just to say, the greater test may not be, or the question, can an artist be honest? No, because I think they generally, that's why they're artists, is to be honest. The question is, do we want them to be?
I think that is a good question, because I think this example that you used of Paul McCartney and a community artist, being so far apart from each other, I think there's reasons for that, and a lot of valid reasons, right? In terms of, Paul McCartney's impact on the world, or the Beatles' impact on the world and music, and on we go. But you actually prompted me to think of a really important point, a really important aspect of why we asked Carla Wakefield and Stefano to be part of the 3 project. And the reason is that, I didn't mention this, but it was sort of inherent in my description at Koi, is that one of the things I noticed about community artists that start out as community artists, but aspire to go beyond for a career or whatever, that there seems to be some sort of some sort of progression or hierarchy or pecking order that starts to happen with artists, right? When an artist kind of reaches that crossroads, the one artist that wants to distance themselves, right? Fine, I can't hang out with you anymore because I'm now who I am. Those are the people that the gifting and the talent are absolutely there, but what it causes is for them to exclude, right? To say I can't, right? The other type of artist who might just be just as amazing, just as talented, but have this community rooting, use their talent to include, right? They're inclusive. They don't use their talent to intimidate, which is another thing that happens, I think, to some artists, that they get so good and so well known that they're intimidating, and they kind of know it. Then there's another fork in the road for an outstanding artist, where, interestingly enough, because the experience in the community has been so transformative for them, right? So life-giving for them, that they actually, rather than distancing themselves from the community, they actually plant their roots even deeper into the community, right? They mentor, they host open mics, they hang with emerging artists and work with them, right? They encourage them to become artists, and they spend a lot of their time doing that. One artist I know, as an example, outstanding artist, lives in rural Alberta, and what she wants to do is she's a great artist, but what she wants to do is she wants to get in a truck and take music lessons to small town rural Alberta, to little places where they don't have a music teacher, right? Where they don't have a music school.
Joni Delorier and Troy Coco, when they were on the show, expressed that same sentiment for next summer.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
I want to bring Steph in.
Please do.
Because not only is he a part of the 3 project in terms of him speaking to his journey as a musician and all these other things, you're also the music director for this project.
Yeah.
We'll get to the other part because I think there's absolutely some depth there. But the music director part, talk about that for a minute.
Well, Frederick approached me in last March. So we kept saying, well, I'll talk to you next week with a little more information. And so April came by, and he had a pretty good idea in how he wanted to pursue this vision. And so he said, I would like you to be my music director. And first reaction was, Wow, that's nobody ever asked me anything like that, and I don't know if he knows enough of me to offer that kind of position. But I said, you know what? I'll take the challenge. I'll be honored. And yes, that's something I've always wanted to do. So I took it, and step by step, we talk about it. You give me more information on the weekly basis, and then he told me exactly who were the artists involved, and which Wakefield and Carla are two of them, and I've been working with them, with you, Carla, and Wakefield, when we were doing the spoken words beatnik style at Lolita before the pandemic.
Which is now the Attic. Yeah.
Now it's the Attic, right?
It's the Attic.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, that had to be a good thing for you, right? Where you know, you get to.
Me.
Yeah.
I can't believe he's putting all this
all this faith in you.
Faith in
Yeah,
me.
I'm sure your first reaction was, well, what, Gavin wouldn't do it? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You know, I love you.
Me too.
And so, yeah, like that's got to be a good feeling for you, because, you know, I've known you now for quite a while, and you and I have worked together. Come on,
we worked together for almost 15 years.
Yeah, off and on. We did the Fusion project together, and I know, you know, a little bit about you, and I know that this has got to mean something great for you.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just an honor. It's a beautiful opportunity for me to grow as a professional, because involves a lot of work, you know, musically speaking, and but I'll take it with a smile on my face, because I'm so excited about it. Frederick instilled in me but a big amount of confidence that I forgot I had, you know. And it's a little scary. It takes a lot of courage, like Frederick mentioned.
And just to go back a little bit, Steph, you know, because you and I talked during the pandemic, you know, and, you know, we know that the pandemic on an artistic level, you know, for artists and musicians and everything else, you know, really kicked the shit out of us. And I would ask you, you know, what do you get? What are you doing these days? And you're like, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm doing the same thing you are, nothing. And so, and neither one of us knew what was going to come out on the other side of all this. Right. And we are, you know, on the other side of this, more or less. And here you've been given this opportunity. And I think that, you know, once again, there are ways forward. And even though we can't see them in the moment, they do exist.
Absolutely.
But you got this gig, and I'm happy. Who are the guys on the gig? Who's the band?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, then I took a big chance, because I wanted to have the cream of the cream. Like Frederick said, there are many talented professionals in town, and I think that Calgary has an extremely healthy music community, and also in the jazz department. So I had to choose. I talked to Pat Belleville.
Oh, is Pat doing it?
Pat is doing it. He's on the saxophones.
Okay.
I mean, he's going to bring it. You know. Then we have Sheldon Zambor on keys.
Oh, come on.
Yes, exactly. Come on. And we have Robin Tuff
on drums. Wow.
And Whitesy Hellard on backup vocalist.
Wait a minute. You're a leader that knows how to delegate? Come on.
Right.
They don't exist. Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. And so, okay. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the artist part of this, because you're also showcasing.
Yes.
And I would like to know, what does that mean for you? What does it mean to be showcased in an environment like this?
Well, first of all, it's not just showcasing the music. It's a storyteller. You know, we are exposed in a way, courageously, to the public, to the audience, telling a story, the story behind the motivation of our music, the way it was composed, the moment that the germs appeared, and the process that took place when you needed to dress this germ and let it develop into a composition. So, like Fred mentioned, because we had this interview some time ago, I only feel motivated. I don't write music every day. I'm not that kind of composer that sits down and go like, I would like to write something in that style or that style. Well, no, I only feel motivated when I feel something, and like a strong feeling. It doesn't have to be negative. It can be very positive, very happy, happy, joy, joy, but has to be felt in the moment very strongly. No?
Whether it's rejoicing or suffering.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, for instance, or when I'm experiencing a moment, it could be walking down the street, or a certain light of the day, or something that happened in the moment, and it catches my attention, and it's worth it. I mean, it's pretty much. I think every artist working that way, but I don't know how other people write music or compose poetry, or they come up with a painting,
Well, and come on. I mean, you're the pen behind Rare Jewel. You're the pen behind Crisis at Christmas. I mean, and those were some of my favorite compositions to play ever in my lifetime.
Thank you. We'll do it again.
We will, and stretch, and just be challenged to that point of where any sort of ability starts to fail. Fred, this is an amazing thing that that you're doing, that you're giving the community. And I don't say that, I say that because it's honest and it's true. This is what a civic entity needs, whether it's Calgary or Edmonton or anywhere else. Once again, we come back to that whole thing about where are great musicians created. They are created in their geographies. You've recognized that. What does this mean for you? What does it mean going forward? It's a one-time deal?
Well, okay, but before I answer that, because it's a really good question, I just want to say a couple more things about Stefano.
Okay.
Part of the reason why I asked Stefano to be musical director is because of my experience with Stefano. Never played with Stefano, but I've watched Stefano. I've talked with him. I've seen him interact with other artists, both amazing, outstanding, gifted professional artists, and artists that it was their first time on stage. And the one thing I've noticed about Stefano is his tremendous rapport and his tremendous empathy and character, and the way that he encourages people. And so, all of us come from different kind of leadership examples in our lives, but I couldn't think of a better person in my experience for the last 10 years that would have made a better musical director than Stefano, with all of the weird, diverse stuff that we're throwing at him, because this great stage band with a great director has to deal with 3 completely diverse, different artists: singer-songwriter, a poet and spoken word artist, and of course now a jazz artist, which actually made it easier when Stefano came into it.
Thank you.
The second thing I want to say about Stefano is that Stefano is, I think, well known in the creative community here as, I've used this term and I use it in a positive way, as kind of the ultimate sideman. He's so great at adapting and playing with everybody that he's a go-to person. You can see this in the gigs that he does and the people that he plays with, that he's seen as this ultimate sideman. But there's a part of Stefano that very seldom, if ever, gets to express itself. You've been involved with him in an album project, so and that's Stefano's talents and gifts as a composer. And so when the circumstances came up that we needed a feature artist, one that was completely different from Carla, completely different from Wakefield Brewster, Stefano was kind enough to say, not only was he willing, but I think we agreed on this, that Stefano saw this opportunity to go from being the ultimate sideman to actually getting an opportunity to share his art as a feature artist, to step out front.
Do you like the guys you're working with? Are they those people that can collaborate and play and, give and get upset without offense? You know what I mean? Can we get into it? Can we get angry and still leave the studio loving each other? You know what I mean? That to me is such a vital part of making art, music or any other.
Unless a conversation like this can take place and actually be shared and put out there, way less people know about it. And unless people know about it, they can't attend it. They can't do anything about it. They can't know that it's happening. And you're a huge part of that.
Well, thank you. And it's not just that, you know, it's everyone being a part of it. You know what I mean? I mean,
Takes
it's
all of
everybody,
us.
well, it's everybody feeling like they can be a part of something. That if it's not Fred's thing, it's another thing. And if it's not that thing, it's another thing. And that's what you and I were talking about
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
too long ago. When is the date for the show?
We're staging the 3 project December 1st and 2nd, which is a Thursday and a Friday, at C-Space Studio Theater.
Do you have an
in
address for
Marlow.
that?
I'm going to say 1729 29th Avenue Southwest.
Okay, and I'll put it in the links as well.
Yeah, it's and actually all the information is on our website, the 3 Project. That's the numeral 3project.com. And tickets are at the 3project.eventbrite.com.
Steph, we know each other. And Fred, I'm so glad that you and I had the opportunity to sit and just get to know each other a little bit better.
No, really happy to meet you, Gavin.
Yeah. So I thank you all. I can share great people like the ones I've had today and everybody else I've had. You all be well. Treat each other greatly. And we'll see you next time. Bye. There it is.